All right, thank you everyone for the patience. Welcome to the joint meeting of the Finance Committee, School Committee, and Select Board, January 8th, 2025. I'm going to call the Select Board meeting to order. Our roll call, we have myself, Alec Rich, we have Roger Marsan, we have Kevin Snyder, and we have Denise Luciano. So you can call your boards too.
Yep, I'll call the meeting of the FinCom to order. I have Paula, Trace, Zach, Gavin, and myself, and Bonnie is online.
I'm here.
And I'll call the school committee to order. I have myself, Dan Sheedy, Sherry Cohen, Audrey Michella, and Justine Callahan.
All right, excellent. And now we have the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and before we start, we did have a memorial.
So I'd just like to make note, we lost a good friend this past week. John Freeman passed away. He's been involved in the town for a very long time. Just like to make note of that, and that his wake is tomorrow, and relatives and friends are cordially invited to attend visiting hours on Thursday, January 9th from 5 to 8 p.m. at the Norton Memorial Funeral Home, 19 Clatt Street, off of Route 40 in Norton. I'd like to see as many people show up for that as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. So, as I had said earlier, I think we're going to try to make this short and sweet. I wanted to get all these boards together so that we're all on the same page about the process and the timeline for the budget. I feel like last year kind of we're a little off the rails, so I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. Did you all have the timeline? Did you get the timeline that was put together by Mr. Units?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So, our initial thoughts were that that town departments would come to Mr. Units with, I believe, what, a 3% budget? Is that right?
Yes, so we are looking at 3%, and if someone's looking at anything other than that, I'll tell them to give me explanations on why they would need more than the 3%.
Okay. So I think for our purposes, and this, I'll open it up to the board after this, but I think initially those budgets should come in at 3%, and that's it. If they want anything above that, that'll be a separate issue that we can tackle later on. But I think everybody should come in with that 3% budget. And again, I'll open it up to the board here.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Chair? Okay.
I'd like to note that it can be less than 3%. That would be okay. Thank you.
So just a quick question for clarification then. So are we not supposed to say what our needs are in order to stay at the 3%? Are we supposed to just,
So
am I missing something?
to answer that question, I'm not sure how it's been done years and years in the past, but last year was a debacle. It was ridiculous. I think coming in at 3% is what we're asking everybody to do, and then your needs will be dealt with after that. We want to see the initial 3% budget, and then afterwards we'll discuss that. That's not going to be something that's discussed immediately. We want to see that you can get a 3% budget to everybody, for every department.
Good question.
Yep.
Personally, I think there'd be some value. I understand the 3% budget ask, but I value in understanding what level funding looks like too. So rather than laying off people in one place, but the ability to hire somebody someplace else, I'd like to understand what does it take to be level set services, no changes. And that may be over 3% for some and under for others.
Yeah, I think that's typically what the schools tend to do, is look at what our level services will be year over year, which is basically keep what we have with, zero cuts. I know last year that was a bigger number, and then we look at
to get to the 3%, this is what is eliminated to get to 3%. So if I'm understanding correctly, you want to see 3%, everything that's going to be eliminated if we get to 3%? Like, are we gonna be like handcuffed right off the bat at 3%?
My position is, and again, this is just my personal position, is that we should see the 3% budget first and then work from there. So if there are needs above and beyond that to get to level services, then we'll work from there. But I think what we did last year was backwards. And it didn't work.
But that's historically the way we've done it since.
And historically, it's been done improperly.
But I understand that's how you would like to see it, but
Mm-hmm.
for us to do it that way, we have to do what's right for our students, our families, our school system. So like what Dan is saying, for us to just come in at 3%, oh, just, forget about everything else. Like, that doesn't make sense for us.
But we're not
that
saying that
way.
that's gonna be the final budget. We're saying this is the very first budget that's brought in. Should be a 3% budget, and then we work from there.
But we have to at least show what our needs are. That it has to be in that budget as well, what our needs are, or else we're not really showing what we truly need. Unless I'm misunderstanding, I don't know if I'm misunderstanding something.
To me, it sounds like the process we usually come in is reversed, like, and I might be misunderstanding what your position is, Steve, but
Yeah.
typically, at least the schools, since in my time here, we look at what level services is, and I'm gonna throw out a number, level services is 5%. Then we vote on our 5% budget, we know we might not get it, and then for us personally, when we get 3%, is when we look at what our cuts for our departments will be. So for us, it's a little different where, and I don't want to speak for police, fire, town, whatever those are, but for us to do 3% off the bat would be disingenuous of us because it's so early in the process that we may come back, and again, that it's the will of the voters to give the percent that they want to give to whatever department it is. So I think for us, it's disingenuous to our staff to say, we're only going to get 3%, which means, again, throwing out a number, 30 layoffs. We can't be flirting with layoffs in February.
So here's the thing. We have a 2.5% increase every year. So every budget should be going up 2.5% to 3% a year. So the very first budget that should come in should be at 3%. And I understand that, so what you're telling me is that you're not gonna come in at 3%, which is okay, I understand that.
I don't know what 3% looks like.
But I think, exactly, well, you should.
We haven't done our numbers, so I can't tell you what 3%
Okay,
looks like.
well, I'm not asking for your numbers tonight.
So
I'm
can
saying
I-
that that's what it should be at.
Can I just
And
ask
if you
another
can't do that,
question?
then there's a problem.
Please understand, I'm trying to understand, to make sure I'm not misunderstanding something, and I don't mean any disrespect at all with my next comment, but whose call is it to tell us what number we need to bring forward?
Can I jump in here quick? So, I think we need to kind of take one little bit of a step back. One, and looking at Mike and Jen, when we talk about annual town budgets per the town charter, that is not necessarily the school. The school committee sets the budget, period. What we are trying to do as a school committee is I would like to, and I think my members would as well, our school committee, would want to work with the select board and the FinCom to put together something that we are all, as a majority, in favor of, right? We go to the townspeople and say, hey, listen, this is what, FinCom agrees to, select board is, also put their, stamp of approval on it, school committees set with this number, and we kind of send something forward that makes sense, obviously, to the town. Hypothetically, though, that's us playing nice, correct? Mike, Jen?
So you're right, you do have, you're an independently elected board, you have the right to prepare your budget any way you see fit, and then submit that, and there's a timeline when that has to be submitted. And then it's my job then to prepare my budget for the town, which includes the schools, and present that to the finance committee and the school committee and the select board.
And that's why when those final budget documents are done, there's separate columns for school committee recommended budget, and town manager recommended budget. Is that correct, Mike?
You'll see, the final, you'll see a finance committee recommendation and a town manager.
Yeah, and then like what the request
Yeah.
was. I think from my perspective, I'm thinking about the school budget really in 3 different phases. So a 3%, which is what we're being asked to put forward, a level service, which is what our goal is to provide the same level of services for our students year after year. But then I actually think that's even different than what Sherry, you were saying, what our needs are. We had a $3.4 million budget deficit last year. We laid off 29 people. We were able to bring 3 people back over the summer. We were able to get a little bit of money at fall town meeting. Our needs and our level service are not the same thing. And I can tell you level service will be more than 3%. Christine and I have the numbers. We've spent a lot of time with them already. We're also in the middle of contract negotiations with our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our custodians, and our administrative assistants. So it's very challenging to put together a budget and say this is the number when you're in the middle of negotiations, because we do not know what that final number will be, and we have to negotiate in good faith. So I understand where the select board would like us to come forward with 3%. I understand that's the goal. I think it's really important for us to show what the level services are and what the needs are of our school community as well.
Okay, so just to jump in, I think there is a little confusion. I think the 3% is not meant to be your final budget. The 3% is meant to be a starting point, and then we work from there. I think that's just getting confused somehow.
I guess I just don't understand why we can't come to you as a starting point, because we have the mandates and all of that. I just don't understand why we can't come to you with a budget of our level services, what we need, and a 3% if that's what you want.
You come with both, but my personal thought was, and I believe we discussed this before, was 3%. That at least as a starting point, you can come with both at the same time.
I think we have to, because I think we would be doing a disservice. And again, I don't know that I'm wrapping my head around what you're saying.
So last
last
year you came with a 12% increase ask, and it took up until what, a week before town meeting to get a 3% budget. I want to start with the 3% budget and then increase it from there as we can. So we want to do it backwards from what was done last year, because I think everything's been, personally, I think it's been done backwards for years.
Well, I mean, again, I don't think, and again, with all due respect here, like, where we were last year, we were also staring at what was going to be a possible override. The residents spoke loud and clear. I mean, it is what it is. So I think now that we know what we're looking to do, where our residents, voted on, I don't think a 3% is crazy to start with personally. I totally agree with what Sherry's saying in terms of, this is not how we've done it, and not to mention, it might be impossible for us. I'm just gonna say it right now. We're going contract negotiations with 3 different unions right now. We're in contract negotiations. We have zero idea what that's going to look like. Christine, Jen, I think the teachers is what, 85% of our budget, their salaries and whatnot, and stipends and everything. So I mean, we're looking at a huge number that is a very well unknown right now, Obviously, we're trying to, I think both the teachers union and us negotiating the contracts would like to have that done sooner than later, because that's always going to help us. But I do think everyone's got to be prepared that, like, we may not know those numbers. I mean, take a look around at what's happened, in the state in terms of, teachers' contracts and negotiations and how they've gone. We might be in a spot that, come March, where we're supposed to submit this budget, we don't have a contract done starting for July 1, and who knows what those costs look like. So I do think we got to be a little careful, to Sherry's point, of what does this look like? What does 3% look like? And I think, I'm not necessarily disagreeing, but I do think we need to all understand we're in a little bit of a different situation here with the times we're in.
So
Okay,
Steve,
go ahead, Denise.
I want to clarify first, this board had not discussed the 3% idea before, but I understand the desire to say it's 3% across the board to make it easier and just say, listen, we've got 3% increase in dollars, so everyone gets 3%, and let's just look at what that looks like. But that doesn't take into account the different complexities of the different departments and the size of the different departments, right? You may have a department that actually doesn't even need as much money as they had last year because someone retired, someone new came in that's at a lower rate, and they actually could go with a decrease. But they're gonna come back and say, I've got 3% increase, so I'm just gonna figure out where I can spend that 3%, right? Versus us putting it where we might actually need it. So
Well,
we should be
that's-
budgeting based on level services, keeping everything the same versus just saying everyone gets 3%. That's not taking into account complexities at all.
So again, I'm not saying everybody gets 3%, I'm saying that's a starting point. That should be the starting point, because that's what our budget allows, so let's start at that, and then, Mike, did you want to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, general government, 3%. That doesn't mean that every department is getting 3%. Like you were saying, general government, if general government can only get 3%, there may be some departments that get
But
less.
but general government may not need 3%. And so what I don't want to see happen is that we're adding headcounts in one place and then laying off 30 more teachers.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear that it's not like each individual 1-2-person department, you get 3%. You know, it's the general, if we looked at 3% for general government, it would be 3% total for the entire general government operation.
I really just need to understand, what is it going to cost us to keep everything the same as it is today? What will that cost us next year?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Snyder.
maybe I can help.
Thank
So the school budget has to be finalized to the town manager no later than 8 weeks prior to town meeting, which is March
Correct.
24th. So that's, what, 7 weeks from now? Something like that. So a question for Jen, if you're putting together your budget, does it take you longer to put together a level services budget and a needs budget, and in addition to a 3% budget? And if it does take longer,
Well,
are we
to put-
talking 5 weeks longer, or are we talking, a week?
So to
Because-
put together 3 different line item budgets does take us quite a bit longer, obviously, because we have so many line items. Our budget is very big. But, we have our level service budget. We obviously, there are projections in that based on contract negotiations and assumptions, because that's the reality of what we have to do right now. For us to put together a 3% budget, we can certainly do that. I don't know how long it would take us. I think it's fine. I mean, we definitely were able to put together all the budgets that were requested last year with ample time. And we know what our needs are. We know what the positions are that we really wish we could bring back. We also know and are able to read the room in terms of the community spoke very loud and clear last summer. An override is not on the table in any way, shape, or form. So what my administrative team has been asked to do is to be really creative in what we're asking for. And if you are asking for a new position or something along those lines, then what are we giving up in order to have that happen? We cannot be going in with additional FTEs. They know that. We've talked about this. You're not going to see a budget from the school system that is outrageous. It's going to reflect the needs of our students.
Okay, so I guess the point I was trying to make there is that I don't necessarily see the advantage of just saying, well, everybody give us 3%. And I don't really see how that speeds up the process necessarily. If we're going to get a budget at 3% on X date, and then we're gonna get another budget 2 weeks later, and we're not saying that the schools or whoever won't get 3%. What does it matter if we start out at 3% and then get another budget a week later? It's not like we, the select board, has anything to say about what the school committee presents to us as their budget. Am I making sense?
Yeah,
That's correct.
absolutely, and this is just a request, so we're not mandating that from the school committee, it's the school committee's budget, so we're not, that was just a request as a starting point, because that's the percentage that our increased budget is every year. So I think that's a no-brainer for me, to start at 3% and work our way up if we can, work our way down hopefully in other departments, but again, I don't think that's a huge ask. Again, Dr. O'Neill said that the town has spoken, they've spoken very loudly, and they want us to stick to our budget, and our budget is 3%. If there's more to give to the schools, I know there will be, then that increases. But I think that's a starting point, and I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that.
I think it's just important for us to show what our needs truly are.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree with that
because we
too.
just keep getting cut, not, I shouldn't say that, I shouldn't say it that way, you know what I mean? Like, we've had to, do layoffs and change programming and things like that. So I just think it's important, and it's our job as a school committee to really show what our needs are. That's what I was saying, and so I appreciate that that's your recommendation, and that's kind of that's why I was asking, and I said, please don't take offense to that, because I just want to know, because if it's our job as a school committee, I feel like I'm not holding up my role here if I'm just doing a 3% and not doing what we actually need. So I just wanted to make sure I was clear
Yeah,
about that.
I would never say not to submit what you need,
Okay.
no.
I just want to make sure I understood. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and again, it maybe came off wrong, but no, the 3% was the starting point, the baseline. Let's start there and move on from that. I'm sorry, Sandy, you want?
Yeah, just, I think from a FinCom perspective personally, I'd like to see as much information at the beginning as possible. So if you want multiple budgets, that's fine, but I would definitely want to see, rather than saying, give me your 3% now later, give me more information. I'd rather have that information up front, so we can see what do those cuts look like. And the other question I have is, do we think that we're even going to be able to give schools a 3% given that it was a 1% last year? Like,
That's a
we're talking about
whole
3%,
different question.
and that may not even be all the cuts that have to get made. So I guess I'm not sure if that 3% for other budgets or for the general government, where you can kind of play around and lower and upper, just balance them out is one thing, but 3% of the school budget is a huge number. And I don't know that are we guaranteeing they're even going to get that? And if not, then that's a lot of work to then have to make more cuts on top of that.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, so that, you'll see all the information, it'll be the same way on all the town departments. Town departments will be asked to submit their budget based on level services. And then it'll be up to me to go through all the departments to say, well, we don't have that, so this is what's going, and this is the budget we're gonna present.
Which that's how we've done it in the past, correct?
Yeah, that's been the process,
Right.
and that's what concerns me about being given a number of 3% now, because historically, years when we had a better budget, haven't gotten 3%. So I mean, and respectfully, Steve, I just don't want to start throwing out a 3%. Like, historically, what the schools will do is look at level services, submit that, and I think the school committee is a little bit unique, where we set our budget for our department versus Mike setting it for, the other departments in town. So, and we say this every year, our vote on our budget is largely a figurehead vote, because it's not the final number that we may be granted through the budget process at town meeting. Like, we know what our needs are, and we could vote on a 7% budget knowing we're not going to get it, but that's what we have to do to advocate for the students that we represent and the families that we represent in town. So that's my only hesitation with hearing a 3% number off the bat. And because when we looked at this at town meeting, I remember Mike had a slide, when we looked at the 3% increase, I think it was only like 900,000 for the whole town. And then once we had those allocations to, other things that we needed to pay off, it was like down to, a couple of 100,000 to spread out over the whole town versus, things like that. So that's my only hesitation, Steve, and I understand, your perspective that the budget was a mess last year, but I think, at least from speaking from the school committee side, we've been very, proactive in that we know what our level services would be, and I'll throw out a number and say it's 7%, it's not. And if we come back to 3%, we know what our 3% is going to look like. I think we have a good grasp on what our budget looks like, and I trust Dr. O'Neill and her staff to know that level services might be 7%, we don't know. But if we know from the conversations Dr. O'Neill is going to have with Mike that it's going to be 3%, then we'll be pretty in the ballpark about what our slashes might need to be.
I
So
think,
that last sentence, you reiterated the reason for the 3%, is so you can know what potentially your cuts might have to be. Because, last year it was, we're cutting 60 people, and then it was 40, and then it was 30. So you didn't know, because you didn't prepare that. So if you prepare the 3%
We
initially.
were prepared.
Hold on,
So
hold on.
I think it's
Hold on,
important for me.
let me jump in really quick. So hold on, last year, we came with multiple different budgets.
Correct.
And why we came with multiple different budgets is because this meeting didn't really happen of exactly what you guys wanted. And I'm not blaming Selectboard, I'm not blaming FinCom, but we've never been given a piece of paper that tells us what the timeline looks like, that's why, one of the main reasons why I wanted to be here tonight is to hear Selectboard's looking for 3%, what is FinCom looking for us, so we don't have to go back and do, well, now we need this, oh, we want that, oh, we want this. This is why that meeting occurred in the first place. We're going to have these discussions. We sat through multiple meetings of, hey, if we get 4%, this is what cuts are gonna look like. If we get 2%, this is what cuts are gonna look like. If we get 1, we went all the way down to 0. There was a time where we had, that, we were talking about, we might get a reduction, not even a 1%, and we had that prepared. So we were ready to go and we were prepared. We were just following the lead of Mike and the Select Board and saying, hey, what are we actually looking at? As soon as we got to that number, all of us was handing in a different piece of paper. So, and again, I don't mean to jump on you like that, but it's okay. You can't jump on the school committee and say we weren't prepared, because we were prepared as we have ever been.
Okay.
Can I jump in?
Let me apologize for that. I should have said that. Yeah, the school committee did put a lot of work into it, and everybody did. I think the way it came out publicly, it seemed different. But that being said, it's a recommendation and a starting point, so that you're prepared, that's all.
And Zach, if you don't mind, just, one of the things that's really challenging from a school perspective is that we're having a lot of conversations about people's livelihoods. And it's not appropriate to have some of those conversations in a public forum where people may be hearing for the first time that they're going to be laid off. If we're having specific conversations about specific roles or positions, they should hear that from me one-on-one, or they should hear that from their principal. They should not hear that during a joint meeting or on television or through social media. And I think the other thing that's important is when you are starting to look at cuts, you don't know what those positions are going to be right off the bat. So you take an average salary and you divide that average salary by whatever your deficit is. When you're finally getting into the nitty-gritty of what those positions are going to be, the salaries are not exact. So that's why those numbers change, and that's why they fluctuate from the beginning of it. But I appreciate, Nick, your point. We were absolutely ready and prepared, and we will do the same this year. If the school committee wants to share a 3% and what our level services is, by March 24th, we will have that information prepared for you.
All right, anyone else? Oh, Zach, go ahead.
Mike, when will you have numbers on what the total,
Say that the last,
when will you have a final number at what the total revenue is for the town?
we should know within about 7 days.
Okay, so instead of going through all this that I've just been listening to,
Yeah.
we have a traditional 70-30 split, okay? So why don't we just take, it's $100 million just for argument's sake. Schools, you're gonna get 70 million. Town, you're gonna get 30 million. And then come up with a budget and then go through your normal process and say, okay, that means X amount of cuts for our department. Bring it to the select board, bring it to the finance committee, and then let's have a discussion whether we want to take from here and move it here. Instead of, let's come up with 3, let's come up with 2, this is what we got. We got $100 million, you get 70, you get 30. Now let's have a discussion of priorities, and then we can say, okay, do we want to take from here and move it there? Or take from the schools and put it there? I think that's a much fairer, smoother process when he's going to have a number for us in 7 days.
So I want to make 2 points. One's a question / comment is, one of the things we had a lot of last year is like last minute requests. So publicly, I'd like to state and ask, does the finance committee need any additional information? I know we got some requests last year, late in the day, that we just couldn't come up with when it came to salaries and line items and things like that. So if there's any information that anybody is looking for as we start this process, please let us know, because we had to say no last year because it was a daunting task to figure out as we're going through our budgets. The second part, I just want to, for everybody to consider, last year was unique when, throughout the summer, override failing, and then all of a sudden, the money comes in higher with different various things. I'm not gonna think I'm smart enough to know what it was, but we have to remember, at least when it comes to the schools, that, June 30th, we close our books, July 1st, we open them. So any supplements we get, like this past year, we can't add staff typically once the school year starts. So when we look to, rebound from any cuts that we make, if it's later and later in the summer and after the school year starts like this year, we're not going to be able to possibly fill some of those positions because the folks we would target aren't available. So, fall town meeting, we typically do some non, things in the budget, but we can't add staffing at fall town meeting because it's, November at that point. So I just want everybody to be aware of that, we can't get this nice supplemental budget request and then be whole again. So that's one of the things that is challenging for the school, is that we do have to close our books and start a new year in July.
So it's all the more reason to prepare this properly, as best we can, which I'm sure you'll do. So, go ahead, Mike.
Just, in the charter, it says that the school budget shall be arranged to show the actual expenditures for the 2 previous fiscal years, the estimated expenditures for the current year, and the ensuing fiscal year. So there should be 4 years on the wait.
Make sure we do that.
On the detail part, thanks for bringing that up. Mike, when you present the budget to us with all the different departments, it'd be very helpful for both the school and from the town side to see head count. Ideally, the last 2 years and then the proposed year going forward, what the head counts are for each of those departments and those line items.
So, I guess Dan had a great question, like from FinCom. Do you guys hand other departments a little list of what you want to see, how you want to see it? Or is it just kind of like, present your budget and go?
I hand them notes that says, stop spending money.
You know?
I think Mike gives them a worksheet, that's a standard worksheet that has the, right, Mike, you give everybody like a template to fill out that we've been, I think, using for several years.
Yeah, I think Dan had a great question too, and it's another reason for this meeting is to avoid those last minute changes and those last minute corrections, and everybody worked so hard last year. It's incredible how many hours FinCom put in, so we're trying to avoid their 10-hour meetings, hopefully. Go ahead, Paul.
Mr. Chair. I just want to answer your question, Dan. So I know there was a member last year, late in the game, I apologize for that, that asked for the salaries similar to how we see it from the other departments, where there's each person with their role, with their salary and their incentives. So he was asking for that information, and I believe your system, the way you do things, can't easily pull that. It was going to require a lot of work for you to produce that.
It doesn't all exist in the same place.
Exactly.
So it's
And
just
I
different with
completely
400
understood that, but I
employees.
believe going forward, this member in particular wanted to see the salaries to look just as it's presented from the other departments.
So I guess my question is could FinCom provide us a bulleted list of an index card of what you would like to see from the schools? Because we are a little bit different from what the town possible departments want. But if you give us that information of what we're looking for.
You could get it from Mike, I'm sure.
Yeah, but if we get that, well, again, I've sat on this, not that long, but I've sat on for 3 years and I've never seen a template to go from.
It probably goes to Jen and Christine.
And I believe, Christine, you and I have seen what the town salary piece looks like, correct? Did you see that last spring?
Yeah, you showed us one.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing, Paul, and I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert, but I think when it came to that salary line item, we we as a school department didn't have access to the town's program to print that list. It was something Christine was gonna have to do literally line by line, which was, I think she said it was gonna be like 10 or 15 hours of her time or something, and we said, we can't do that this late in the game. You know, especially because, you know, to your point, we're preparing for multiple different scenarios, so that's why, you
Completely
know,
understandable.
yeah, so I mean, it's not something, I mean, Christine would ultimately, you know, do it if asked, but it was so late in the year that we just couldn't do it, we couldn't make it happen.
Would,
So again, the whole goal of this meeting is to avoid those things and try to all get together and figure this stuff out. So we're not doing that.
so, I mean, this member is not present, I'm just bringing it up on his behalf, and so, in case he waits till April again to bring it up, I'm just gonna bring it up now. Yeah.
So-
Well, I have one more question, sorry. Can I
Go ahead.
just- Mike, as far as providing revenue information to us, possibly next week, maybe the week after, are you also gonna know the estimated, like, fixed and shared expenses?
I won't have that next week, no.
Okay. When do you think the earliest you would have that?
What's that?
What would be the earliest that you would have that to us?
Probably towards the beginning of February.
Okay.
Mike, I did have one question, and this kind of goes back to everything that happened over the summer, is when we look at our budget process and we get everything ready for town meeting and so forth, is there numbers that we don't have as a town? Like, we don't know the state aid, we don't know the state things. Do we have a list somewhere of what we don't know and we're just speculating even for town meeting?
Yeah, it's usually the state aid, we'll never have it. They never finish the budget until July now.
Well, we have a rep here, so maybe we'll,
It'd be a good time to point out, thank you, Mike Jason, for coming tonight.
That wasn't a directed question, Mike, or anything like that, just, you know.
That's all right.
Okay, so anyone have any other questions? Statements? Want to yell at me? Come on, let's do it.
no, I think this packet has definitely been very helpful. I don't know, I've never seen it, so this is great. It kind of laid out everything that we kind of needed. And like I said, from the schools committee standpoint is, you know, we want to work with you guys and we want to, you know, have the support, you know, kind of running in our favor, if you will. So I think that's exactly kind of what we were looking for and giving us some dates and things that we need, and it helps us out when we're trying to go through this whole process, as well as, you know, we do tackle a lot. I feel like for like 7 months last year, all we did was talk about the budget, so, you know, hopefully this will definitely clear that up.
So Nick, as you said, you know, for 3 years, I didn't see this either, and the select board in my 3 years had not taken the lead on budgeting. So I'm hoping to, you know, we can kind of take the lead and make it a smooth process for everybody. And one other thing is, you know, a lot of times last year, we had meetings because we had an emergency meeting because FinCom didn't vote on something that we should have voted on first. I'd like to avoid that this year, and anything that we have to vote on first should come before the select board and then go to FinCom. Save everybody time. Sandy, you agree with that?
Appreciate that, yes.
I said it'd be good if if the select board actually discussed the budget stuff too,
Yes.
together.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's definitely, sorry.
On that note, can I just ask if we can, if it's possible to get all of, I know the department heads have to get you their budgets by a certain date, Mike. I mean, I know you have time, you want to have time to look that over and do whatever you need to do for those, but can we get all of that, select board and FinCom, all up at once? I know it's a lot, but,
As
I feel
they're
like
submitted,
what's that?
once they're all submitted, just.
Yeah, just like push it all over and let us have it all at once. And I think that the piecemeal is tough, especially if we get it like on a Thursday or Friday, and then God forbid I actually have plans on the weekend, which doesn't always happen, but, you know, once in a while. And then
Not during
I don't
budget
have any
season.
time to go, yeah. So it would be nice to kind of have, be able to look at it, you know, and it all in one big picture too, to be able to see it all at once.
I think it's possible to have a peaceful and, you know, a smooth budget process. I think that when we created these joint meetings all those years ago, it was to do just this. Because I think that when we're working together and we have open communication, that's when we understand what everybody needs and wants. And so that's why I think that there's just been a lot of changes, obviously. And so I think that kind of joint meetings kind of fell by the wayside. And that's why it's important to have them. We were doing them like quarterly you know, when we first started this all those years ago. Because I think that when there is understanding, there's a little bit more grace with each other, and we're not so quick to jump down each other's throats. I think that we can lead by example, and by listening to each other, being kind. That's always my famous thing as I head out of this term. But I think that it is possible to do that, you know, all together, and my hope is that we can actually do that, work together and just have a more peaceful budget process this year.
I agree, and again, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to call this meeting. I mean, I talked to Paula last year and Sandy, and they relayed the frustration about how the budget process went last year and how much, I keep saying it, wasted time. I mean, everybody's time is valuable, we're all volunteers here, and I'd like to waste as little time as possible if we can, and hopefully that'll work, so.
I just want to plug again, I'd like to see the head count for each department for the last 2 years in this coming year, or I will ask each one as we go over it.
I second that. All right, anyone else?
I just wanted to ask Mike, when are the department head budgets due to you? What is that date? I can't, if it's on here, I passed over it.
That's it, sir.
February 3rd, I think it is.
February 3rd?
Yeah. It says FY '26 budget request
Oh,
forms
yeah,
due
with
with background
Request forms
materials.
due.
In duplicate.
In duplicate.
Okay. For Sandy.
Don't forget.
Because the first one we throw out.
Just so we know on public record, that's not the school is March 24th.
Yeah. Are you sure?
Hopefully.
All right, anyone else? I know, I'm sorry, I promised a quick meeting, and who told me I was wrong? Dan, yeah.
49 minutes ain't bad.
He started late. I said type 15 when I walked in, I'm like, type 15, let's get out of here. Okay. Anybody else? Last call. All right. Excellent, so,
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn the FinCom meeting?
Second.
All in favor?
And motion to adjourn the school committee meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Nice one.